here's a continuation from the Eibach meet, which is the Eibach tour.
So this is obvious our manufacturing area right here. It's 165,000 square feet. I would say probably 90% of the stuff that we sell in the United States we manufacture here. There's some random Audi, BMW kits that we don't really sell a lot of here, so we'll just buy those out of our German office. We manufacture in Germany as well. The plant in Germany is 265,000 square feet, so about 100,000 square feet bigger than this place, and they're adding on another 80,000 square feet in the summer. We do primarily high performance aftermarket fun stuff here. In Germany they'll do a lot of industrial stuff, so they'll do big like valve springs for locomotive engines and ships that are like 2 or 3 times this size. All sorts of weird stuff. We, like I said, just do primarily the fun stuff here.
Okay.
We've been here since 2001. We've got about 100 employees, give or take, just depending on how busy we are. We have the capacity to do anywhere between 3,500 and 4,000 springs a day. So these are the actual coiling machines. So what's going to happen is this green hopper right here is going to be flipped over onto its side. The wire, like this, which you can see a spool of right here or even behind you, is going to be fed into that. The hopper is going to be flipped back over on the side. This machine is going to pull the wire through here. These plates are actually pulling it through. It's going to come out this way, and right at this point, these hydraulic presses are going to control the overall shape of the spring. It's just going to coil straight out right here. This is actually a cutting device here. It will hit the spring and cut it. So the hardest part about actually coiling the springs is getting the machine set up to coil the springs. It's not like cutting a chunk of aluminum where you put the chunk of aluminum into a machine, you plug in your program, and it just cuts it out and it's done. The tensile strength in the material is a little bit different each time. So every time we go to coil over a spring, even if it's for, we've coiled FRS springs 10 times already, it's still going to be a little bit different each time. So what the guy does is he plugs in his base program, he'll spit one spring out. He's got to walk it all the way through the rest of production. He's got to grind it, preset it, shot peen it, get it into QC. They'll check it and they'll say, okay, your rate's a little bit off, your coil count's a little bit off, go back out and make some changes. So he comes out, just based on personal experience, he'll make his changes, he'll spit out another spring, walk it all the way through production, do it again. So he'll keep doing that until he has a spring or a design that's within our specification, which is basically 2% on all given tolerances. So once he gets to the point where he has that, he flips the switch and he'll run off 100 or 200 or 300 or 400 springs in 45 minutes to an hour, really. So you may have 3 or 4 hours in setup to coil springs for like an hour, but it's just it's part of the deal. It's what you have to do to manufacture a spring. So over here, guys, we got these are just industrial grinding machines. So depending on how the spring sits in the car or sits on the shock, it may have to be ground on one end. So let's see if we don't have. So they're going to go in looking like this on each end, and they're going to sit in these templates right here. This machine's going to spin this way. The grinding wheel is going to spin the opposite direction on top and bottom. So when they're finished, it's going to look like this on both ends. It's all computer controlled, so when they get to the appropriate grind height, the machine just go ahead and shuts itself off. This is one of the slower processes we have at Eibach, because as you can see with this big old spring like this, I mean, you can only get about 16 or 17 of those in at a time, and this particular lot's not very big, but it could have easily been 400 or 500 springs. So I mean, there could be a time when we've got 2 days spent on just one lot of springs. So we've got another grinding machine on the water right now, just to increase our capacity, and then we've got multiple other ones right here just for various type springs sizes. Sorry. So one of the things we do here at Eibach that a lot of the other spring manufacturers don't do is we shot peen every spring that we manufacture. And what the shot peening does is it's almost like taking a piece of steel and just taking a shotgun and shooting it 3 or 4 times. It's getting hit with tiny pellets as it gets pushed through the machine, and what that's going to do, it's going to increase more surface area in the spring. It's going to get rid of all the extra stress in the material. It also kind of gives the spring a dimply effect, so the powder coat sticks a little bit better. So as you can see right here, this guy, it's got just these real slight dimples all the way over, so the powder coat's going to stick just a little bit better. So it's going to go into the machine looking like this, and it's going to come out of the machine looking like this. Now a lot of the other manufacturers, again, they won't shot peen their springs. because as you shot peen the springs, you actually shot peen the inside of the machine as well. So it's constantly in a state of deconstruction. So once a month, this thing will need a full rebuild. And a lot of the guys won't do this because it costs too much. But it's part of our reason why we can offer that million-mile warranty, and most other people, you know, typically can't. So another thing that we do is, a lot of the guys, if you guys have had a lowering kit in the past from somebody else, they'll say, you know, put it on your car, it's going to settle an inch after 2 weeks or something like that. We actually build all that into our design. So what we do is we take every single spring we manufacture, we obviously lift this up, we put it in the machine, close the door. This machine's going to set the spring all the way down to block. So it fully compresses it, brings it all the way back out, and then we don't have one sitting right here, but from there, we put it on what we call a V block just to measure it, and if it's a millimeter out of spec, it's too short, we just throw it away. So we build all that settling into the spring. So once you compress it to block, bring it back out, you can do that over and over and over again. It's never going to lose any height at that point. If it's 270 millimeters, it's going to stay at 270 millimeters for the life of the spring. So we've kind of got, that's what we call presetting, and we've got those machines kind of littered all over the building because there's not really a fast way to do it. You can only do it one spring at a time. This is the device I was telling you guys about, the V-Block. So what they'll do is they'll preset the spring, get it in the V-Block, push it down, 241 mil, so boom, it's in spec, it's good. This thing actually gets calibrated usually once a month just to make sure we're within specifications. So what's happening now is this particular lot is probably about 100 springs. So prior to it going to coating, we're going to bring in a random 7 to 10 pieces. We're going to test these for all the physical dimensions we call out on the spring. So we're going to test it for free length, we're going to test it for spring rate obviously, coil count, travel, ID, OD, inside diameter all the way through the spring, not just the top and the bottom. So we'll check those for all physical dimensions. If everything passes, they'll send it out into powder coating. After they powder coat it, they're going to take another random 10 pieces, they'll bring it back in here and they'll check all those as well just to make sure everything's within specification. Now at any time they find a couple that are kind of funky, they'll actually pull another 10 or 15 in, they'll check those. If a couple of those are kind of weird as well, they'll pull the whole lot in. And they'll check every single one of them for every physical dimension just to make sure we don't have anything that slips out the door that's out of specification. So if this lot was 200 or 300 springs, every single one would get checked for every one of these dimensions and checked on the machine for spring rate. So I mean, it could take 2-3 days to just do this one lot if that was the case. So our winders and everybody out there have to be extra careful to do everything, you know, correct, so we're not wasting a whole bunch of time, you know, checking and rechecking springs all day long. And from there, once they get out of the powder coating, we send them into the warehouse, and hopefully from there we sell them pretty quickly. From start to finish, a spring's never going to leave the plant. Once we coil the spring and it goes all the way through production, we actually do all of our own powder coating in-house. So this is actually our powder coating machine right here. It's a carousel system, so what's going to happen is the spring's going to be loaded up over here. This first bin it goes through here is a pre-wash. It just gets all the fingerprints and oil and debris off the spring. Then it will wrap back around and we'll go through the powder coating booth on the other side. We still lay all of our powder on by hand just because we do things in so many different shapes and sizes. From there it will go through an oven at about 400 degrees. It comes out the oven on the other side over here, wraps back around. From start to finish it takes about an hour for a spring to go all the way through the powder coater. Once it comes off the line, we actually stamp our logo on it, or we'll stamp other people's logo on it. As you can see, these springs are made for Ford. So we'll put our name or the customer's name on it, we'll put the part number, also put a production code. What the production code allows us to do is actually track back who we got the material from, where we got the material, who coiled it, who ground it, who preset it, who okayed it in QC. Basically the entire life of the spring. We'll hold that information up to 7 years. It's part of our QS certification, so we can supply guys like Ford, Toyota, Mopar, TRD, most of the OEs. Not in an OE capacity where they're putting a bunch of springs on a stock Ford Focus, but it's always aftermarket. We make most of the stuff for Toyota, TRD, Ford Racing, a lot of different people. So these are actually FRS camber plates right here that are being built. So actually part of the process is done now. They'll get back onto the CNC machine just to cut our logo in and a couple other adjusting points. We've got the bottom of the shocks here. We cut all these guys in-house on our CNC machines. Then over here, there's two other machines that are primarily used for motorcycle fork springs and also valve springs. We actually do a whole bunch of valve springs out of here. You don't really hear about it because we don't do a ton for ourselves. We do them for a lot of other people, race teams, the guys at Cosworth. It's kind of hard to describe what's going on here, but this is the sway bar bender right here. So a bar is just going to be fed into this side. It's just going to be pushed back out, bent, pushed, bent, until a finished bar. Once the bar goes into the machine, a human basically doesn't touch it until it's completely done and pulled out of the machine and it's ready to go. So you don't have any chance of somebody pulling the bar out and maybe clocking it, at a wrong angle or something like that. So every bar that spits out is exactly the same as the previous bar. This is actually our sway bar end finishing area. We actually bend the sway bars over on the other side of the building. We finish them off over here. So what we're doing here is we're taking the sway bars, we're going to put them in this oven right here. What we're going to do is we're going to heat up the ends. And then from there, we're going to take them over to these machines. We're going to press the end flat on this machine. And then depending on what the vehicle is, we always try to make the bars as adjustable as possible. If there's absolutely no room, they will not be adjustable. If there is room, they'll be 2, 3, 4, even 5-way for like the Nissan GTR and some of our Porsche stuff. So from there, they're going to bring them into this machine. We've got it set up just to punch, so we'll punch 1 hole, 2 hole, 3 holes, 4 holes, whatever the case may be. We can bend tubular or solid material up to about 38 millimeters. All of our bars are shot peen, so they're never going to break, they're never going to wear. We use nothing but the best hardware and bushings and whatnot for them. We put grease in the actual boxes, so you actually have fasteners that are typically re-greasable, just in case your bar ever starts, squeaking or making any funny noise. Another thing we actually do is we put these keepers on the bars. These aren't quite finished. So these rings we press on before we start doing the ends, and what we'll do is these get located on each end here, and they'll get basically pressed into place, and it just keeps the bar from just walking from side to side in the vehicle and causing any contact or anything like that. Just another thing we do to keep customer calls down, and just to make sure that when we take off an OB bar and we put on one of our bars, it's literally a direct replacement. It's not going to make any funky noises or anything. These are actually just some tempering ovens right here, but this is where we keep the bulk of our wire. We have wire coming in usually every 2 weeks, and we try to keep enough in stock for usually about a month's supply. We only buy from 4 mills in the world. We've got a guy in Germany, a guy in Kentucky, a guy in Korea, and a guy in Japan. Those are the only factories that can produce steel with enough tensile strength to meet our million-mile warranty that we have on all of our springs. So they come in just various sizes. We typically stock anywhere from like 3 millimeters up to like a 27 or a 28 millimeter. And then when you get into our sweet spot, which is about 10 millimeter through 18 millimeter, we actually have quarter sizes. So we have 10.25, 10.50, 10.75, 11.0, and we'll go all the way up, just so we always have the right size material to make the perfect spring, so it's got more travel than just about anybody else out there. So unfortunately, we've got the warehouse door closed today. The warehouse is pretty cool. It's about 40,000 square feet. At any given time, we usually have about 300,000 springs in stock. And that's valve springs, fork springs, suspension springs, racing spring, basically any type of a coil spring that we sell. Shock manufacturing area. This is something we've actually moved into the building in about the last year or so. we were making most of our coilovers in-house by hand, just on a smaller scale, and now we've just kind of jumped into the program a little bit more, bought a whole bunch of new machinery, and now we're anticipating selling a lot more coilovers. So we buy all the tubes, obviously, from somebody else. They're all made to our specification, though. Once the tubes and everything get in-house, everything else is done here. We cut the threads into the tubes ourselves. We cut all of our own nitro steel shafts. Use nothing but the best materials. We've got some robotic welders over here that will do all of our welding, or depending on the kits, we'll actually do a lot of the welding here by ourselves, by hand. So here's an example of the tubes you guys kind of saw over there. Once we get through with them, we'll cut all the threads in, and like we said, we'll cut clips into the bottom and the top. Everything is checked honing wise just to make sure it's in specification. It's no different than like a cylinder, in a motor. If you've got, if you got any honing issues or any scratches in here, you're going to get blow by just like a motor would. We've got, this is actually the shock assembly, filling, testing, R&D area, a little bit of everything. So we've got a bunch of different industrial size filling machines here. We've got shock dynos over here. On this particular shock dyno, we could do military stuff, we could do off-road stuff, just a little bit of everything. We either do, depending on the style of the coilover, we'll use our automated filling stations to fill them, or some of the high-end stuff we'll actually fill by hand still. And then this is where all the assembly is going to happen. We've got, these are actually our R2 coilovers for Mustang. Everything is still assembled in here. Everything is done by hand. Every single shock that we manufactured is dynoed. Everything that we build is rebuildable here at Eibach. So if you had one of our adjustable coilover kits and you wanted to play with the valving at all, you give it back to us and we turn it back out in a day. We'll add or decrease the valving, or add more bump or rebound, whatever you need. Yep.
How much do you charge to revalve it?
It's usually $190 a shock, I think. So again, everything's built in-house by hand. Every single shock is dynoed. Everything is serial numbered from here. We go ahead and we box them just right outside this door, and again, hopefully we sell them pretty shortly. That's pretty much it.
So that's pretty much it. It was a pretty lengthy tour, really showing you the ins and outs of Eibach and how they do their products, how they create the suspension products for cars like the FRS, BRZ, Toyota 86, and a lot of other cars too. Not just Scions, Toyotas, Hondas, and all types of other import cars.